Let's be honest, vulnerability is power, but only when you know how to wield it. In a world where we're conditioned to chase, beg, and confess, there's nothing more powerful than restraint wrapped in confidence. When emotions run high and silence grows long, the urge to say I miss you can feel irresistible. But let me be clear, those three little words, while innocent, give away too much, too soon, too easily. They put all your emotional cards on the table, and not everyone deserves to see your full hand. This isn't about manipulation. This is about mastering emotional intelligence, commanding respect, and protecting your inner power. Because when you lead with strength instead of need, you shift the dynamic completely. When someone leaves a void in your life, the immediate reaction is to fill it with words, with validation, with attention. But here's the truth. The one who controls the space between interactions controls the connection. Saying, I miss you is a beautiful sentiment, but it's also a flag. It says, you've been on my mind.
I'm waiting.
I'm affected. And while authenticity is sacred, timing is everything. So instead of reaching for the overused, try this. It's quiet without your energy. Or, I was smiling for no reason today, then I remembered why. These aren't pleas for attention, these are echoes of intimacy. They say, I noticed the absence, but I'm not broken by it. They trigger memory, emotion, and curiosity. And more importantly, they give nothing away that you're not ready to give. It keeps you emotionally in control. It invites the other person to lean in, to wonder, to respond. It signals presence, not dependence. And remember, mystery is not about being confusing, it's about being unforgettable. When you maintain a layer of emotional mystery, you make someone work to understand you. And the more effort they invest, the more they value the connection. Not by how often you speak, but by what you choose to say when you do. And if you really want to leave an impression, say something like, I was thinking about that thing you said and I'm still smiling. It's light, it's specific, and it gives just enough to stay on their mind, but never enough for them to feel they've figured you out. That's emotional mastery, because confidence isn't loud. Confidence whispers. So the next time your heart tells you to say, I miss you, pause.
Breathe.
And ask yourself, what do I want to feel in return? If the answer is connection, pull back just enough to draw them in. Use your words like silks, gentle, deliberate, and unforgettable. Stop chasing validation. Start commanding presence. Because when you speak from a place of grounded strength, you don't just get attention, you earn respect, devotion, and curiosity that lingers long after the conversation ends. Don't give your power away in three little words. Whisper something that leaves a mark instead. What most people don't realize is that emotional tension, when used with care, is more seductive than any grand romantic gesture. It's the unspoken electricity, the lingering pauses, the way your presence is felt, even when you're not around. In relationships, especially intimate ones, it's not always what you say that deepens the bond. It's how you say nothing. That silence, that strategic restraint, that pause before you respond or reach out, it builds something far more powerful than constant communication ever could. And yes, in emotional closeness, just like in physical touch, anticipation is the spark that can light a fire. Let's be honest, we live in a world where connection is constant. Texts, calls, updates, stories, everything is fast, instant, and often meaningless. But real intimacy doesn't thrive in immediacy. It breathes in space. It grows in absence. And that absence, it can either create distance or build desire. When you learn to allow emotional tension to do its job, to let it rise and fall like the rhythm of breathing, you create a kind of psychological arousal. You don't just become someone they like hearing from, you become someone they crave, someone they feel drawn to, even when you're silent. Think of it like this. Physical intimacy isn't about constant touch. It's about the contrast between touch and no touch, the buildup, the delay, the longing. When you remove something that someone has grown used to, your voice, your words, your presence, what's left is a sensory absence, an ache, but not the kind that weakens. It's the kind that deepens desire. This is how emotional energy mirrors sexual tension. It's not the climax, it's the tease, the escalation, the almost. And in emotional intimacy, that almost becomes a powerful force. When you withhold saying, I miss you, you aren't closing off affection, you're redirecting it. Instead of pouring out vulnerability in a way that might land flat or feel too familiar, you're holding space for a mystery. That mystery isn't cold, it's captivating. It's the type of energy that keeps someone awake at night, wondering what you're thinking, what you're feeling, if you're thinking of them the way they're thinking of you. That's the kind of bond that moves beyond basic communication. That's where emotional magnetism is born. In every relationship, especially those with deep emotional or physical bonds, one person is often more expressive than the other. But when you become the one who masters emotional pacing, who resists over-disclosing, who allows space instead of rushing to fill every moment with declarations, you shift the polarity. You start drawing energy in instead of giving it away. You become the anchor in the storm, the calm in the chaos, and most importantly, the one they can't quite figure out. And that curiosity is incredibly intimate. It's like the moment before a kiss, that millisecond of silence, of tension, of will we or won't we. That's where all the electricity is. Saying I miss you prematurely is like skipping straight to the kiss. It might still be meaningful, but it lacks the intensity that comes from waiting, watching, leaning in, and not quite touching. If you want to create that same chemistry in a relationship, you have to resist the impulse to always soothe, always label, always reveal. Emotional tension is the seduction that keeps the intimacy alive, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. People are wired to chase resolutions. When they feel a gap, especially an emotional one, they want to fill it. That's why saying I miss you often feels like relief. You say it, you get it out, you soften the discomfort, but what if you held it? What if instead of softening the edge, you kept it sharp, just long enough for them to feel it too? That's where mutual yearning begins. Not from one person giving and the other receiving, but from both standing in the pull, resisting just enough to feel the power of each other's presence in the absence. This approach isn't about games, it's about depth. Emotional tension invites someone to look beyond the obvious, to lean in, to listen harder, to feel deeper. And when it's intentional, it creates a rhythm in the relationship, one that echoes the most intimate rhythms of the body, the inhale and the exhale, the closeness and the pause, the word and the silence after. So instead of saying, I miss you, let your absence speak. Let your energy whisper through the gap. Let your restraint be the doorway through which they must walk to find you again. You aren't pulling away, you're pulling them in, one slow, steady breath at a time. There's something electric about words that don't rush, words that don't beg, plead, or overexpose the heart. In a relationship, especially in intimacy, how you express yourself is just as important as what you express. When you say I miss you too often or too quickly, it starts to lose its weight. It becomes expected, easy, predictable. But when you whisper something more subtle, something with a little restraint, a little mystery, it hits deeper. It makes them lean in. It doesn't just reach their ears, it lingers in their chest. In the dance of intimacy, language is your rhythm. Every word you use is a step forward, back sideways. If you want to draw someone closer, you don't need to throw all your emotions at them. You need to speak with intention. Speak in a way that invites them to wonder, to feel, to imagine. Because once someone starts imagining you, you're no longer just a presence. They've made you part of their internal world. Think about the tone of your voice when you're turned on. It slows down, it drops, it softens. That tone, calm, intentional, low, makes the other person feel it in their body, not just hear it with their ears. And when you express your emotions in a way that mimics that tone, even through text or whispers, it creates a sensation of intimacy that far surpasses a basic phrase like I miss you. That's not just communication, that's connection. Imagine whispering something like, your energy is still all over me. It doesn't even clarify what you mean, but that's what makes it potent. It's open-ended, sensual, and emotionally charged without being obvious. It suggests longing without desperation. It brings up memory, sensation, emotion. It allows them to interpret it in a way that feels personal. And in doing that, you give them an emotional experience, not just a statement. That's the difference between flat and full-bodied communication. When your words tease instead of chase, you give the other person room to feel desire. Intimacy grows in that space. If you say too much, too soon, or too often, you saturate that space. You don't leave room for their mind to roam. And in relationships, especially those with a deep sensual current, roaming minds are a good thing. It means they're thinking of you, wanting more, asking questions in their head that only your presence can answer. There's also a kind of erotic confidence in saying less, in choosing words that are sparse but powerful. You crossed my mind in the middle of the night. That's not a declaration, it's a whisper. A slow drag of emotional fingers across the chest. It lets someone know they're still in your atmosphere, but you're not gasping for their return. That balance is magnetic. It makes them feel special, not pressured. Desired, not demanded. The way you use your voice, whether it's through text, tone, or silence, can seduce just like a slow touch on bare skin. Words that tease don't give everything away. They say, I'm here, I'm feeling something, but I'm not giving it all to you just yet. That just yet is where intimacy explodes. That's where passion starts to simmer and emotional longing transforms into something deeper than just missing someone. It becomes a psychological craving. In every romantic or sexual connection, there's a kind of tension that builds when you give in layers too much and it feels overwhelming, too little, and it feels cold. But when you use just enough, just the right phrasing, just the right amount of suggestion, it becomes an invitation, one they can't resist answering. Think about the way your body reacts to something that almost touches you. Goosebumps, anticipation, curiosity. That same reaction can happen emotionally when your words have just enough space for them to enter. Saying, "I miss you," can start to feel like emotional noise, but saying something like, "Today felt like something was missing, but I didn't mind it too much," that's intimate, that's loaded. It makes them think, what does she mean? Is she okay? Was it me? That thinking, that curiosity, that's what you want to create, because curiosity builds desire, and desire builds intimacy that goes far beyond physical. You don't have to perform or pretend. You just have to choose your words with the same care you'd give to touch. In intimacy, your voice can be as powerful as your fingertips. When you tease emotionally, when you imply instead of explain, you invite the other person to feel. Instead of analyze, that bypasses logic and goes straight to the heart, or even deeper, straight to the gut, the core, the place where real connection lives. This is how seduction works in the realm of communication. It's not about being manipulative. It's about understanding emotional impact. It's about letting your presence linger in their mind long after the conversation ends, like a soft perfume on a pillow, a memory of a laugh, or the echo of something they can't quite put their finger on, but want to feel again. That is the intimacy of words that tease, not words that chase. There's something about not knowing that drives people wild, not in a chaotic way, but in the most sensual, curious, spine-tingling way. Mystery is magnetic. It's the emotional equivalent of a slow undress. Not everything shown, just enough revealed to keep the hunger alive. In a relationship, and especially in intimacy, being a little unrateable, just a touch, makes you unforgettable. Because once someone feels like they've fully figured you out, they stop looking deeper, they stop reaching, they stop desiring. But when you're a beautiful blend of warmth and depth, of presence and silence, of giving and holding back, you become the kind of person they keep wanting more of. Think about it, what's more exciting? A fully lit room, or the one where shadows play across the walls, hinting at shapes and textures not yet touched? That's how emotional mystery works in relationships. It doesn't hide. It entices. It says, come closer, but not all at once. In intimacy, that's not just desirable, it's electric. Because when you hold part of yourself back, not as punishment, but as intention, you create space for imagination. And in relationships, imagination is one of the most powerful forms of arousal. When you don't immediately explain your thoughts, your moods, your feelings, it makes someone lean in. They want to know more, they want to explore. They start to read between your words, look for meaning in your silences, feel you in ways that are far more intuitive than spoken language could ever convey. That's where emotional intimacy deepens beyond just communication into connection. When you become a puzzle they want to solve, not because you're playing games, but because you're layered. You move from ordinary to unforgettable. Look into this, people don't crave what's handed to them. They crave what they feel they earned. That applies to physical closeness, and it applies even more to emotional closeness. When someone feels they've peeled back a layer of you, not because you gave it easily, but because they made the space for it, that moment sticks. That memory lingers. And that intimacy becomes a bond that isn't easily broken. So when you say something like, you cross my mind at the strangest moments, instead of I miss you, you're giving them something to think about, to hold on to unravel. That sentence is full of emotion, but it's wrapped in softness, in subtlety. It doesn't reveal everything. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And in relationships, it's the whispers that echo longest. Mystery and intimacy doesn't mean being cold or detached. It means being conscious of your emotional depth and revealing it selectively. It means choosing not to narrate every emotion, every thought, every desire the moment you feel it. It means knowing your emotional energy is valuable, and not everyone earns the whole story on page 1. When you hold back just a little, you protect your center. You give from strength, not from scarcity. It's the same with sensuality. The most intimate moments are often not the most obvious. Sometimes it's the way you look at them across the room, the way your touch lingers half a second too long, the silence after a deep laugh. Those are the moments that build tension. Emotional mystery does the same thing. It lingers in the pauses, in the slight turns of phrase, in the glance that says, I'm here, but not all the way. Come find me. And when someone senses that you're not fully revealed, that they haven't entirely seen you, it ignites something primal in them. The desire to understand, to explore, to uncover. That desire is not just attraction. It's intimacy, and it grows stronger over time because you don't become stale. You don't become routine. You stay surprising, alive, evolving. Even when you're vulnerable, you don't have to be exposed. You can say something intimate and still leave room for wonder, like, I remembered something about you today, but I'll tell you when it feels right. That kind of line pulls someone closer without giving them full access. It tells them there's more to me, more to feel, more to experience. That's the kind of emotional intimacy that feels like seduction, that stays in the body like a memory they can't shake. Mystery isn't about creating confusion, it's about creating anticipation. And anticipation is everything in both emotional and physical intimacy. When you build anticipation, you build a rhythm, and rhythm is what makes intimacy feel alive, like a dance, a touch, a breath that's waiting to be taken. So don't rush to tell every story, explain every emotion, offer every thought. Let them come to you, let them wonder, let them feel the thrill of discovering something about you. Not because you laid it all out, but because you gave them something real, something felt, something they had to reach for. Because what is reached for is remembered, and what is remembered is desired again and again. Intimacy isn't just built in the grand gestures or passionate moments, it's etched into the details, the subtleties, the quiet corners of communication that often go unnoticed. The way you say something, the timing of your message, the softness of your tone, the words you choose to use, all of it matters. And in relationships, especially those filled with deep emotional and sensual layers, detail becomes desire. It's not about saying more, it's about saying meaningful. When your words are intentional, even a single sentence can feel like a kiss to the mind. We often underestimate the power of nuance. A generic "I miss you" says something, yes, but it says the same thing everyone else might say. It's a phrase recycled so often it becomes background noise. But if you take the time to tailor your expression, to find words that carry a feeling, a moment, a memory, you suddenly shift the energy. You transform routine communication into intimacy. That's how emotional depth is expressed through language that feels alive, specific, and real. Picture this, instead of saying "I miss you," you say "I saw a couple laughing at a joke only they understood, and it reminded me of that time we couldn't stop giggling in the car." That isn't just a message, it's a moment, a shared heartbeat, an invitation to feel something with you again. You're not just stating emotion, you're recreating connection. And in relationships, that kind of emotional precision makes the other person feel not just wanted, but remembered in the most intimate way.
This is where sensuality enters emotional communication.
Think of how touch works. It's not always about pressure. Sometimes the softest trace across the skin leaves the deepest impression. The same applies to words. When you carefully construct a sentence that draws from shared experience, from something only the two of you understand, it hits with a quiet intensity. It's soft, but it stays. It lands somewhere deeper than the surface. Because you didn't just speak, you touched with your words. In intimacy, language is foreplay, and foreplay isn't about getting to the point. It's about savoring every second before it. When you speak with sensual intention, you create emotional foreplay, the slow drip of connection, the simmering feeling that builds with every well-placed detail. This isn't about using poetic language for show. It's about being present enough in the relationship to notice what matters, and then brave enough to express it. Here's a hook to remember. Most people want to be loved, but even more deeply, they want to be seen. When you show someone that you notice them, not just their presence, but their patterns, their stories, their smallest habits, you make them feel exposed in the most sacred way. And exposure, in its safe and loving form, is the gateway to lasting intimacy. Imagine sending a voice note late at night, your tone low and warm, saying, "That song came on again, the one you played in the kitchen when you danced like no one was watching. I didn't skip it this time. I let it play." That line does more than convey that you care. It says, "I remember, I feel, I hold your essence in the quiet corners of my day." That's not drama. That's not performance. That's connection, rooted in detail, filtered through intimacy. You don't have to be a poet to do this. You just have to pay attention. What did they do that made you pause? What memory flashed through your mind while you were brushing your teeth or walking to work? What smell reminded you of them? What ordinary object suddenly became charged because it was once part of your time together? These are the moments that, when shared, don't feel like words. They feel like soul, and people don't forget soul. In emotional and sensual closeness, it's the depth of attention that makes someone feel desired. When you can remember how they take their coffee, the way they wrinkle their nose when they're unsure, or the exact rhythm of their laughter, you become the keeper of the little things. And the little things, they're not so little. They are the architecture of intimacy. They are what makes someone feel safe, seen, and seduced all at once. Even in absence, details build connection. If you're physically apart but emotionally attuned, you can send something as simple as, "I made your kind of tea this morning. I held the cup with both hands, just like you do." That line is subtle, but it hits like heat under the skin. Because it's not about grand proclamations, it's about shared rituals, remembered without prompting. Let your emotional expressions be textured. Let them carry warmth, memory, scent, sound. Don't tell someone how much you care. Show them through how you express it. Your attention to the sensory elements of your relationship speaks volumes. And when you craft your words with that same care, you move beyond communication. You move into connection that can be felt, not just read or heard, because the most unforgettable intimacy is built not on volume but on detail. Stillness has a presence all its own. It's not empty, and it's never weak. In relationships, especially the deeply intimate kind, stillness becomes its own kind of touch, its own kind of rhythm. The silence between two people, when used with intention, can be more powerful than any flood of words or gestures, because in that space, you invite something deeper than reaction. You invite reflection, awareness, and presence. We've been taught to fill every pause, to soothe every silence, to chase closeness by constantly doing, but the most confident, most emotionally aware person in the room is the one who can sit in stillness and let the moment speak for itself. When you don't immediately text back, when you don't rush to say "I miss you," when you hold the pause after an emotionally charged moment, you create a space that isn't absence, it's intensity. It's the emotional equivalent of a breath held between two lips before a kiss. And that breath, those few seconds of uncertainty, of tension, of wondering what comes next, is electric. That's where true intimacy ignites. Not in the rush, but in the stillness between. This stillness isn't a void, it's a mirror. When you allow it, the other person is invited to reflect, to feel, to miss, to notice the shift in energy. If you're always the one filling the space, always the one reaching out, always the one easing the emotional distance, then the other person never has to sit with the sensation of missing you. They never have to notice the way your absence shifts their mood, their thoughts, their body. And that noticing, that awareness is what makes the bond real. It's what makes it felt. Here's a hook worth holding on to. Silence is not rejection, it's resonance. It's the echo of everything you've already said, already shared, already. When you practice emotional stillness, especially after moments of connection, you allow the other person to sit with the residue of your presence. You give them time to feel you instead of just hearing from you. You stop chasing intimacy and start embodying it. In sensual dynamics, the same truth holds. The moments right after closeness, after touch, after passion are not meant to be rushed. They are meant to be held still, quiet, slow. That is where the heart speaks most clearly. That's when the body starts to realize what it craves isn't just stimulation, it's recognition, depth, attunement, and emotional stillness replicates that same energy. When you say less and feel more, when you stop speaking just to be heard and start listening with your whole being, you become the kind of partner who doesn't need to perform closeness, you radiate it. Sometimes people confuse stillness with distance, but the truth is, it's the most present form of energy. It's the space where both people have the room to experience the relationship instead of managing it. You're not walking away, you're staying, but not in a frantic way. You're staying grounded, staying open, staying aligned with your center. And that emotional rootedness is deeply attractive. It makes someone feel not just wanted, but safe. There's something irresistibly sensual about someone who isn't always on, who doesn't jump to explain or fix or perform, someone who can meet your gaze and hold it quietly, someone who doesn't flinch when things go quiet. That presence is calming, commanding, and magnetic. It says, "I'm not afraid of what's here between us. I don't need to fill the silence. I trust it, and I trust you." That level of emotional mastery isn't just impressive, it's intimate. You can take this stillness and express it through micro moments. You can pause before answering. You can take a deep breath before speaking. You can give space after sharing something vulnerable. You can allow the silence after a long laugh to settle, like warm skin under a blanket. You don't need to move away from it. Stillness isn't the end of intimacy, it's the extension of it. And if you're not physically together, stillness can be practiced in your digital rhythm. You don't need to reply instantly. You don't have to reach out with an "I miss you" just to reassure. You can send nothing and let your energy speak for you. Because when your presence is felt, your silence becomes a language. It says, "I'm not gone. I'm simply holding space." That space is where intimacy breathes. It's where emotions settle and deepen, where words have time to root instead of just fly, where attraction is allowed to grow from the inside out. Stillness in a relationship is like that moment when the lights dim and the hush falls over a room before the music starts. It's full of promise, full of tension, full of emotion. And the person who can live comfortably in that hush is the one who doesn't just create connection, they embody it. So when you feel the pull to say more than you need to, when your fingers hover over your phone screen, ready to send something impulsive, ask yourself, what would happen if I let them come to me? Not because you're trying to play hard to get, but because you understand how emotional pacing, presence, and stillness are tools of intimacy just as powerful as any words or touch. Power, when it comes to relationships and intimacy, isn't about control over another person. It's about control over yourself, your emotions, your presence, your responses, your desires. That kind of emotional regulation, that self-command, is the new aphrodisiac. It's what makes someone not just attractive, but unshakably magnetic. In a world filled with emotional reactivity, impulsive texting, and overexposed vulnerability, the person who remains grounded in their own emotional power becomes the one who stands out and stays unforgettable. The kind of power that seduces doesn't come from being loud or demanding attention. It comes from being deeply in tune with your own worth and expressing yourself from that inner stability. When you don't need to constantly express how much you miss someone, how much you care, or how much you long to be close, you create emotional mystery. And that mystery is not a game, it's an invitation. It says you can come closer, but only if you move with respect, with presence, with depth. There's something sensual, almost erotic about someone who knows when to hold back. Someone who's not emotionally impulsive, but emotionally aware. Someone who can sit with desire and not let it control their behavior. That level of restraint, that delicious slowness, creates tension that heightens every interaction. Just like physical intimacy thrives on timing, so does emotional intimacy. And when you master the art of that timing, you hold the room, you hold their attention, you hold the power, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. Here's a hook worth remembering. It's not about being hard to get, it's about being hard to forget. That distinction changes everything. When you speak and act from a place of emotional independence, you send a message without saying a word. I am full, whole, and complete. You are welcome here, but I don't need you to complete me. That energy is powerful. It's the kind of emotional maturity that makes someone feel safe, yet excited, calm, yet stirred. It's what creates real intimacy, not dependency, but polarity. There is nothing more seductive than someone who knows how to hold their energy, how to pause before they speak, how to delay gratification, not because they're withholding love, but because they understand that anticipation deepens connection. When you say I miss you out of reflex, you may momentarily feel relief, but it gives your emotional center away. Instead, when you say something like, you've been in the back of my mind all day, lingering, you give the same message, but with texture, with intrigue, with presence. You express desire without surrendering power. Power in intimacy means you don't need constant feedback to know where you stand. It means you can sit in the silence, the space, the unknown, and still feel safe in your own skin. You don't reach out because you're afraid of losing connection. You wait because you know connection doesn't disappear, just because it's quiet. That confidence, that emotional stillness makes someone feel drawn to you in ways they can't explain. They want to understand how you remain so calm, so self-contained, so alluring without effort. And the truth is, you're not performing, you're just rooted. This kind of emotional power also means you don't rush to fix, to explain, or to overstate your feelings. You let things unfold, you observe, you respond, but you don't react. You allow the other person to feel the weight of your absence, to recognize the energy you bring into a room, into a message, into a moment. You don't say, I miss you because you need reassurance. You express only what aligns with your energy, not out of fear, but from grounded clarity. It's the same way the most sensual touch is often the slowest one. Not rushed, not frantic, intentional. When you walk into a space, when you speak into a conversation, you do so as someone who knows their own worth. That's what makes your presence seductive. It's not about proving yourself. It's about allowing yourself to be seen as you are, without apology, without explanation, without needing to be chased. You also understand that true intimacy can't be forced. It has to be chosen. So instead of emotionally chasing, you create space. You allow the other person to lean in, to approach, to pursue. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you know real connection doesn't need to be begged for. It flows naturally between two emotionally whole people. And if it doesn't, you let it go. That's real power, not clinging, not convincing, but releasing. This power shows up in the little things. The way you smile, but don't always explain your thoughts. The way you send a message that's warm, but not overeager. The way you listen more than you speak. Yet when you do speak, every word feels soaked in intention. You become someone who is respected, not just desired, someone who is pursued, not just liked, someone who is remembered long after the conversation ends. Not because you said too much, but because you said exactly enough. You're not afraid to be alone. You don't speak to fill the silence. You don't seek validation to feel complete. You live in your energy like it's a second skin. That kind of power in a relationship isn't intimidating, it's inspiring. It raises the standard. It calls out something higher in the other person. It awakens them. It invites them to rise. And if they can't, you still stand. Still powerful. Still radiant. Still whole. You